Brett, how you doing, buddy?
Doing great, Ethan. Yourself?
I am doing fantastic. I hear you had Howard Stern this morning.
I think a little later on in the day, I'm heading over there.
Oh, okay, cool. He was a huge Bowie fan, so I was going to see how that went for you. But you are also a huge Bowie fan, correct?
I'm a pretty big, right now I'm a huge Bowie fan, yeah. How about yourself?
I'm a fan. I got a guy down the hall, my buddy Maurice. He is probably the biggest Bowie fan I know. Like, he has both the Barbie dolls. So I'm not at that level, but I'm definitely a fan of a lot of Bowie's music and art for sure.
Well, I got good news. You guys can go to the movies together because I made the film for both the hardcore fan, the casual fan, and the person who kind of says, I know who David Bowie is, but I don't really get it. I think the film has something for every audience. And most importantly, it was designed and created only so we can have a cinematic engagement. I love movies. I love going to the movies. And I wanted to hear some of my favorite music in a movie theater on the best sound systems in the world with some of the best picture, something you just can't get at home. So the film is created more like a Bowie experience than a traditional documentary where, with talking heads and a lot of information you can sort of get on Wikipedia. Bowie's, was kind of an enigma. It was mysterious, and that was kind of the magic of Bowie. And what I want to offer audiences is a sort of intimate experience encounter with the magic, and of the Starman.
Yeah, I was going to talk about some of that. First of all, do you think people who didn't get Bowie before will get him at least a little bit more after watching the movie? Do you think they'll be like, okay, I understand it now?
100%.
Awesome.
I don't think it's possible you can walk out of this movie and not, at the very least, completely admire the courage and the audacity of David Bowie. This is a man who went through life, who approached life with an understanding that we only have a limited time here, and he was going to have the most adventurous life of anyone who's walked the face of the earth. And I think you kind of see it happen throughout the film, and it's not by accident. He willed it to happen. He designed his life so that he would take himself out of situations where he was comfortable and put himself into environments that were downright hostile, even because it woke his senses, it challenged him. It's something that very few of us, it's kind of the opposite of how most of us go around our lives, trying to be sort of comfortable and secure. And he did this both creatively, artistically, and also as a lifestyle, for several decades. So it's kind of a marvel to witness.
Was that something unexpected that you learned about David while making this movie, the way he was putting himself out there specifically to have those experiences? Was that surprising to you?
Yeah, because I was just like, I listened to the music, like, I listen, to change. I was just, under pressure. That was me, I was just like listening to the music. I never read a book. I knew that he was all about change, right? I mean, that's a through line that we all sort of assume. There was a great interview with David where he's asked about that, and he said, well, most people think my through line is changes, but really it's transience. And if you think about it, it's a subtle difference, but it's a dramatic difference because change sort of suggests a genre change, a wardrobe change, a musical styling, and more of a style thing, whereas transience can relate more to spirituality, gender fluidity, how one goes about their life, how to approach each day and each moment. And I think that, that's what we sort of see on display throughout the film.
You talked about it earlier, the mystery that surrounds who David Bowie was, because he was a very mysterious person, behind the scenes. Obviously, we all know his artistic personas and everything he put out there in the music. But behind the scenes, there wasn't a whole lot that he shared with everybody. So how were you able to get behind the scenes with the Bowie estate and his friends and family to be able to make this documentary?
Well, I had done a movie called The Kid Stays in the Picture, for a Hurricane and Montage of Heck. So the estate
Seen both of those,
was
yeah.
they were familiar with my work when I went into it. And the way I work is I have to have final cut. I had a rough experience with the Stones where they had final cut on my film, and the film's good. It's just it's not. If you're going to invest 7 years of your life into something, you don't want to be at the mercy of someone else. So, they really, I think, liked the approach I was taking, and in a way, it was a bit like creating a police sketch because I didn't. I met David once for an hour and a half, but that doesn't feel 7 years of work. And so I'm sitting here for 2 years looking at every piece of known media, trying to draw a portrait of a man that I really have never known in life. And what's remarkable is that pretty much every single person that we've shown it to who was intimate with David or worked with David has said it is a spot-on depiction of someone who is very complex and very complicated. And I think that has less to do with me and more to do with the way that he would be present in every moment. So when he was being documented, there was a consistency and a cohesiveness that he really, for someone who was presented as being elusive and hard to pin down, as you see in the film, he might be one of the most honest subjects to have on a couch, for an interview show. I mean, his guy is talking. There's a scene in the film where the BBC says, do you allow love into your life? And David's like, well, I can't really allow love into my life because I don't want to give up. I would have to give up a part of me, and I'm too selfish right now as an artist. And you're like, who talks like this on TV shows? I mean, he was really just as a peer inspiring artist.
I was going to ask, when you got years and years of private footage from the Bowie estate, how do you build a story out of that? Do you start chronologically, or do you find something that sticks out and then you just follow down that rabbit hole and see where that leads you and see if you can pull narratives out of that?
Well, I thought a lot about sort of Star Wars and traditional sort of Greek mythology in terms of fashioning the narrative. And, if you know the Iliad or, any of the sort of hero myths, generally it's our hero goes through a series of tests and challenges. They received help along the way from a Yoda character. And in this case, it was Brian Eno, and the tests and challenges were things that David was creating for himself. So I was able to kind of script and fashion the movie very much like a kind of alternative Marvel film, if you will. If that was in my, at least how I'll tell you something crazy. This was how I pitched it. Okay, I'm straight up. This is what I told my financiers. They're like, so what's the movie? I'm like, okay, well, the movie, imagine there is a transmission being beamed from Earth to a distant galaxy where a group of sentient beings are at a drive-in watching a movie like Star Wars, but the main character is one of them, and they're watching his travels and journeys throughout the galaxy. That's the film, and the guy is David Bowie. It sounds crazy, but that's kind of where we ended up sort of landing. I mean, it's a kind of heroic tale, heroic hero's journey that's got a lot of salad dressing poured all over it, a lot of razzle-dazzle, and most importantly, music like we've never heard it in a cinema, mixed and designed by the Oscar-winning team behind Bohemian Rhapsody. I mean, we can talk about Bowie all day long, but honestly, the whole point of this endeavor was I wanted to hear my favorite music in a cinema where they have the best speakers in the world, and the estate gave us access to we remade the music from scratch, so we can put the bass on the left side and the drums in the ceiling and the synth in the rear, and you can sort of feel like you're a conductor in the room, sort of moving your head around and sort of picking up all these vibrations and sounds, and that to me was exciting. Listen, we are now living in a moment where people say, why should I go to the movies when I can watch one at home? This is the answer to that question.
for the audio experience. And I guess speaking of that, let's get into a little bit of the fun part. Personally, some of my favorite Bowie tracks were Sounded Vision and some of the stuff he did with Trent Reznor. Modern Love, I'm a huge fan of that one. Of course, Space Odyssey. What if you could pick one or a few? What are your favorite Bowie songs that you just like? That those are the ones that really do it to me.
It's so cliche, but when he does Heroes, particularly later in his career, I have a hard time. It's so cliche, but I have a hard time not getting kind of emotional about it. The version that we use in the film has never been seen or heard. It was shot with 35 millimeter during his original tour, the Isolo Tour 2 tour in '78 at Earl's Court. It's one of the highlights, I think, of the film. But it's quite interesting because it was right when the song came out and it had not sort of grown to the anthem it is today. But it's fascinating to see him and his band sort of working through it in, never before seen footage captured by Tony Visconti in 24-track audio. The audio was so clean that we could isolate David's mic from a live show and you couldn't hear anything else. I mean, it was just kind of, we played the film when we played it for the first time for the chief technology officer at IMAX. He said to us, he goes, they had the technology to record this stuff back then, but they could never have imagined what this would sound like in a cinema today. And I think that's really kind of some of the thrills, that this isn't like a nostalgic, trip. Like, you are going to hear the sounds and see the vision in a way that looks like it's, it was recorded last night.
So even though the movie is actually going to open wide, I believe later on today and throughout the weekend, you're saying IMAX, go IMAX, or you're going to miss out.
No. We completed our IMAX run that ended yesterday, and for those who feel that they may be getting deprived, not seeing it in IMAX, it was designed for cinemas. IMAX we were thrilled that they wanted to come on board. They saw that this was a kind of immersive experience, but in all honesty, the film was completed in not in IMAX, but in Dolby Atmos. So, it's built for your local cinema. And if you go in there and you're not feeling the seats move, please get to the theater manager as quickly as possible and ask them to raise the volume, because you should be feeling the music under your seat.
All right, I know you got a very busy schedule. One more question, and this could be about the Bowie movie or even the Kurt Cobain Montage of Heck. When you're working with an artist, whether they've passed on already or they're still around like the Stones, is there ever a point when you're going through stuff and you're like, you know what? I think even that is such a private, personal thing for that artist that I'm not going to include it. I'm going to let that stay, just behind the scenes where nobody else knows about it. Have you come across stuff like that in these people's lives?
Well, for sure with Montage of Heck. I mean, almost everything I saw that was shot in, with the Kurt's camcorder with him and Courtney while they were on drugs was, near some of the hardest images I've ever seen. But Frances, Kurt's daughter, had told me at the beginning of the film, before we started, that, she'd gone through her whole life hearing about Saint Kurt, and that people thought he was kind of like Santa Claus, and she wanted the film to be honest. Whatever it was, she just wanted it to be honest and authentic, and that would be the tribute to Kurt. And I came to the understanding or conclusion that if we whitewashed, if we didn't stare that down, his addiction, that we would be kind of whitewashing it and in effect romanticizing it. And I had a long discussion with his mom, who really didn't want any drug use in the film. And I said, look, if Kurt was here today and he had an opportunity to save one life or sell 10 million shirts, I think he would choose to save a life. And I think that there are people who are going to see this who are going to choose not to do heroin as a result of this. And while I didn't set out to make an advocacy film, what better legacy is there in death than to be saving lives? So, I think that it really depends on the film, the cause, the situation. But I think really, to answer your question, my loyalty is to myself and to the audience, And I don't think that one should editorialize when making films because they're concerned about how it would impact the feelings of the subject. I think we have to sort of move beyond that. Now with Bowie, it's not a biographical film, so I do not go into his sort of personal life with his children. I don't go into really any biographical components, and that was really the point of the film, because you can sort of see and experience and hear all that through other sources that are probably best served in a written medium as opposed to a cinematic medium. So it really depends on the orientation, what the audience is and what it's intended for. Montage of Heck was built for television. It was designed for that space, whereas, with Bowie, this was really created as a global cinematic event.
I got to jump, guys. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. Brett, thank you so much for your time this morning. Moonage Daydream in theaters. Go see it in the theaters because that's the way to do it. Thank you so much for your time, my friend. Can't wait to see the flick myself.
Thanks, man.